Sound speeds. And if you're entry level into the world of production sound, then you're probably trying to get the best bang for your buck, and I don't blame you. A lot of top tier professional sound mixers are the same exact way. They don't want to have to spend money only to have to spend more money and upgrade a couple of months or even a couple of years from now. They want to try to buy one time and use it until it's either dead or still carries a value and they want to upgrade. That way they can trade in something that still has value and use that towards buying something new and stay on the cutting edge. Depends on your style. But there is a piece of gear that I think you strongly need to consider if you are entry level, especially considering that it doesn't even break the $600 price point. This is the Rodecaster Pro from Rode. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No one's really talking about that online. Normally people would say, get yourself some sort of a sound mixer, go into some sort of a recorder, or just get a standalone recorder, perhaps something that starts with an H from Zoom, maybe even something that starts with an F from Zoom. But the Rodecaster Pro, in my opinion, is something you really strongly should consider because of what it offers you for the money. Before we get going, full disclosure, Rode did send me this Rodecaster Pro in exchange for this video. I do get to keep it following this video, but I'm not going to allow that to affect my opinion, so you can expect this to be a fair and honest presentation video. When you're first starting out, you're probably going to be given a lot of very interesting free advice, and interesting is the key word. I've heard people say, get yourself an 8, 12, maybe a 16-channel mixer, go out of that into a 2-channel audio interface, and then record on your computer. Well, provided that your computer doesn't crash and your cables are in good tip-top shape, I would say stay away from that because a mixer, even though it does give you a lot of channels, is not going to give you the quality you need to go out of that into your 2-channel interface. And a 2-channel interface is only going to give you the ability to multi-track 2 channels. And if you're starting out, most likely your mixing skills are not going to be where you would like them to be. So if you miss a mix, you don't have a backup or an isolated track that's recorded in order to save that in post. So I would recommend getting something that is a recorder where you can ISO every track. That means isolate, record every single track that you want. Now, you could say, well, what if I just get myself a multi-channel audio interface and do it that way? Well, that's fine, but you might end up potting up and down on the front of the interface and trying to record that way. You certainly don't want to try to mix on the fly from the computer, especially if you're using an older kind of computer, because that could crash and mess everything up too. I personally record on standalone systems, and I would recommend that if you're starting out brand new, you would want to do the same. So you may say, okay, Alan, well, what if I get one of those mixers and I go straight into something like a Zoom H4n, a Tascam DR40X, something along those lines? Well, I would say avoid those because usually their preamps are not nearly as clean as you would want them to. For example, a Zoom H5 has about a 121 dB EIN, and even something like the new H8, which I nicknamed the Hate, is 123.5 EIN. Now, if you're wondering what EIN is, watch the video I have on this topic. Now, what I will say is that for the money, you can't really do much better than the Rodecaster Pro, and here's why. Let's just say you're looking for something clean, and you're like, okay, well, maybe the Zoom, even the Zoom F series, which is the field mixing series 4 at the time of this video, is $650. And if you're looking at the Mix Pre 3-channel mixer and recorder, I should say, then that right now, as of the time of this video, is $710. But the Rodecaster Pro is just shy of $600 and offers you very much the same kind of functionality and even more. And I know what you're probably thinking. Isn't this kind of for podcasts? Yes, it is. I mean, that's what these buttons are on the side for. But you don't necessarily need to just use it for a podcast. People know it as a podcast, basically a production center. You can either go out of this into your computer, or you can record everything you need for your podcast right here. It's quite powerful. And not only that, the preamps on this are fairly, and I do mean fairly, not great, not like what you're going to run into on an F-Series Zoom or a Mix Pre-Series recorder from Sound Devices, but it is very clean at 125 EIN. Now, why do I say 125 dB EIN is clean enough? Because you're not using dynamic microphones on a film set. you are going to be using condensers. Dynamic microphones, even the Rodecaster Pro, is going to most likely give you a noise floor, which normally people say as long as it's above about negative 65 dB, it's going to be good enough. As long as it's below that, lower than that, you're going to be good. But if you're using a condenser microphone, it's amplified. You're not going to have that issue. Usually you only run into noise floors that high when you use dynamics. Now, the Rodecaster Pro is a lot cleaner than that, especially when you use it with condensers. Now, some of the advantages of a Rodecaster Pro is if you stick a micro SD card in it, which is what's right here, then you can record directly on that, and then at the end of the day, pop it out and put it directly on a computer, or send it off to post, whatever you want. Now, it is a standalone recorder. You have 4 different audio channels, and even if you're using something on set, like a phone call is being used by your actor and someone's talking back to them on the phone, and you want to record that person's voice for post to use, you can do that. If they're using, for example, a gaming headset, and they're doing a computer scene, for a movie that you're doing, and they're playing games, and there's a gamer using a Bluetooth headset, you can very easily go in and record that on the Rodecaster Pro as well. There are various different things you can do with the Rodecaster Pro that are options, and those are kind of not going to be touched upon in this video because I'm going to be mainly concentrating on the main thing that I say this is used for. Now, it is important to note that you do not have timecode as an option on the Rodecaster Pro. Now, there may be a way to use something like, for example, the DD BP-TRX system, and perhaps go timecode in to maybe the cell phone entry port on the back. Maybe you can. I don't know the answer to that, but what I would say is don't plan on timecode. Use either pluralize to sync your audio and your video together, but then remember that your video has to carry an audio signal, so turn the microphone on your camera. Or you're going to have to do a manual dumb slate, clap the sticks, and then sync it up that way in post. Regardless, it's not going to be much of an issue because this is entry level. Now, if they're trying to do timecode and stuff, well, then you're going to probably have to do an upgrade because this isn't going to handle timecode at all. And at that point, you're going to have to consider something like the Zoom H4, F4, because it's a field, not a handy, or the Mix Pre series. But if that is not an option because you're very bare bones and basic, then I would certainly suggest getting something like this, and let me show you why. When you first turn on the Rodecaster Pro, it's going to tell you you're using the Rodecaster Pro, and then it's going to pop up on the main screen. Look at the upper right-hand corner. See that green button right there? That is the micro SD card button. If it does not have a capacity that exceeds the record time that you need for the day, you need to stick another memory card in there and verify it goes green. Otherwise, you're not going to be recording anything for the day. Now, it is also very important for us to, if you've never turned this on before, to verify it's set up for field recording the way you're going to want to do it. Let's go to settings, let's go to advanced, and then look at information. Notice the firmware, which is the most current on the market as of the time of this video, is 2.1.0. If you don't have that firmware or above installed on your Rodecaster Pro, you need to go to Rode.com. Then you need to download the tool that they have that's affiliated with the Rodecaster Pro, the software, or what they refer to as the app, and then you need to upgrade the Rodecaster Pro by sticking the USB-C cable that goes into the Rodecaster Pro into the USB-A on your computer, and then performing that upgrade. If you're not using 2.1.0 or above, then I don't know what you're doing with the Rodecaster Pro, because you need to be using it correctly, and correctly would be the most current firmware, which would be 2.1.0 as of the time of this video. Now, after that, you need to set this thing up for field recording the way we're going to want to do it. That's going to settings, we're going to go to advanced, then go to audio. Now, we're going to go into each one of these things, but first of all, we're going to verify under processing that none of these things are turned on. We don't want to use any processing because we want it to be clean tracks that are not going to be affected by anything we do. All right. Next thing we're going to do is go to operations and turn on broadcast meters and enable pre-fade listen. More on the pre-fade listen here in a second. Now, broadcast meters, what that does is you see how it actually gives a decibel dBFS meter now. If you do not have that on, then it's not going to be set up for, whoops, wrong button, It's not going to be set up for broadcast meters, and you're not going to know what in the world you're listening to or your levels. So you definitely want to turn on the broadcast meters. That is going to be a big time helpful bit for you when you are mixing. Now, another thing that's very important to note is that you want to turn on that pre-fade listen. Here is a Rode NTG5. This is a short shotgun microphone. I'm going to point it right up here at my mouth, and I'm going to start to bring up my level here. Now, oh no, wait a minute, where's my level? Well, first of all, we are going to click right here to go into the channel right here, channel 1. We're going to go into level and turn on phantom power, which is why we're not hearing it. Now, notice right here, the meter is moving. It's peaking right now at 0 dB. That's way too hot. This is, first of all, something I wish Rode would correct. I would love to be able to grab this with my finger and slide it down. But in the meantime, we're going to have to level this thing down until our meters are peaking right at the edge of that green right there, somewhere in there. And that green area is the golden area. Someplace closer to the top of that, maybe gotta go down a little bit more. So somewhere around there would probably be okay. I'm going to go down to 20 just because I want to make sure it never goes out of the green on my peaks. So we're going to go back to right there. Now, what does the pre-fade feature do? If I am not bringing this level up right now, notice there is nothing left and right going to the multi-track that's going output and being recorded on the multi-track. But when I bring this thing up, this level here is brought over into the mix. But if I don't want that to happen, I want to just verify that there's a working boom or working lav here, I can press this button right there. That allows me to listen in the headphones and see that meter, where it's peaking, and that kind of thing. If the pre-fade button right here is not pressed, then we have no functionality out of this button right there. When I press the pre-fade button, it's not going to bring up that level. So we're going to definitely want to make sure that is enabled in order to get the pre-fade listening ability on the Rodecaster Pro. Now, one other thing that we're going to want to verify is back in that same screen. We're not out of the audio just yet. Going to click on multi-track. We got to enable the micro SD card for recording, and bypass audio processing is also a good idea. Do not turn on post fader recording, because if you do, then it's only going to be recording these tracks if it is up. So if it is up, it's going to record at whatever level you have it at onto the multi-track, and if not, if you don't have it up, then you're going to be missing that audio. So you definitely do not want to have that post-fade on. What you want to have is it pre-fade recording on the isolated track. That way, it's always recorded on the track unless you disable it by hitting the mute button, which is what this is right here. And that is another interesting thing that I wish that they would correct on this Rodecaster Pro, is it does not give you the ability to disable and arm each particular track. So if you wanted to just record this one track as an isolated track and you're not using these, you cannot disable those in any way. You're just going to have to mute them. And that way there's no audio being recorded. So that way, if you have actors that are not on set, they're offset someplace talking, you don't want to have them in the mix here. So disable their lavs or whatever you're doing with them by clicking the mute button there, so that way it's going to be recording a muted track. Now, the Rodecaster Pro is currently set up, in my opinion, basically the way you would want it to be. Now, I do want to point out something here. Your boom track will most likely be 1 right here, but if you click on 2 and then look at processing, by default, it's going to have processing turned on all of your tracks except 1. Oops, even 1 did. What do you know? So we want to turn that off. Now, technically, if you have set this up correctly before, processing should be turned off and you're not recording any processing. Wait a minute, that's not the right place. Where was the right place? Was it here under operations? Well, we showed it earlier. It's someplace in there. But my point here is you want to verify that processing is turned off for each one of these channels. And if it's not, you want to turn it off, because you don't need to start messing with any of these and basically EQing or changing the way that the microphone input sounds. Let post do that. Now, you can also go into microphone And it's very important for you to choose condenser to tell all of your tracks what kind of microphone you're using. And if you're not using a condenser, you need to tell it you're using a condenser, because it's by default going to assume you're using a Rode microphone or the EV-RE20, and you don't want to do that. You want to make sure it's set to condenser on all of them. So that is a very important note as well. Under audio processing, obviously, that's turned off. And then under level, you would set your individual level accordingly. And phantom power would most likely be turned on if you're using a microphone. But if you're using a lav, chances are your transmitter is going to automatically send it to you. And you're going to obviously need to go mic out, because the inputs on the Rodecaster Pro are only mic in. They are not line level in. So you would not need on your lav channels phantom power turned on. You would just use your level. And so there you have it right there. This is now set up at the entry level point, I would think, for you to use as a 4-channel mixer. And it's also important to note that if you were to do anything like a headset that's a Bluetooth headset someone's using in perhaps a gaming sequence, you could very easily record that in here. Or if they're on a cell phone and you want to record audio from that, you could do the same thing here. As for USB, let's not get into that in this video, but this right here is going to be your bread and butter right here. You don't need to mess with any of the sound effects or anything. Keep that down all the time, but it's always a great idea. Remember to mute any of the channels that you're not using during your mix. The Rodecaster Pro multi-tracks at 24-bit 48K, just like the big boys do on major film sets and television. And that is exactly what you should be recording at too. There is, as of the time of this video, no way to change that in the firmware. Now, keep in mind that if you're using external wireless units, they do need to be set up to go microphone out, because the Rodecaster Pro only accepts microphone in on the back here. And if you're using something like a short shotgun microphone, going in one track is most likely all you need to do on many low-budget film sets, because as a rule, you want to try to simplify things down to one boom, which means, of course, you need to have a skilled boom operator, and those might be rare in the world of low-budget film, but at least it's something you're going to want to have. Now, if you do use wireless units at all, keep in mind it does need to have a mic level out. And ideally, you want to try to avoid using wireless units, because you have to pay money for expendables. Like if you put a lav mic on somebody, then it would need to perhaps have some sort of expendable tape or something like that you're going to have to spend. And many wireless units also require batteries. Now, there's a couple of options here I'm going to show you, like, for example, the Deity Connect wireless system. This would integrate perfectly with the Rodecaster Pro. Sorry for the cable management, but you could very easily plug in on the back here, set your audio output on the BP, or rather DO RX recorder. That's not a recorder. This is the DO RX receiver, and that would allow you to either use cube style transmitters like this directly on the back of a wireless unit like that, or you could use a body pack transmitter like the BP-TRX, or you could use the BP-TRX system, which is a standalone transmitter and receiver, and you could use this directly on the Rodecaster Pro too. So if you needed to have 3 channels of wireless, this is a great option for you, because you have the DO RX receiver, you have the BP-TRX transmitter, you have the HD-TX transmitter right here, which would also go for either a lav mic, which is less ideal because you don't want to use this normally as a body transmitter, but you do have that as an option. But you would want to use it along with something like this microphone here if you wanted to plug it up to that, a short shotgun microphone, if you want to plug it in correctly. And then, of course, you have your body pack BP-TRX, which also does have a built-in recorder. So whatever you want to do and however you want to configure it, this is a very powerful setup here, which is going to be very cost effective for you if you're starting out. So the Rodecaster Pro hopefully is going to work well for you as a multi-track recorder, and it is something for you to definitely consider for the sub $600 price point, provided you do not need time code. That's the big kicker right there. Time code is not going to be possible as of the time of this video with this, unless you use it perhaps going in on maybe the smartphone entrance on the back here, and you use it as a multi-track in that. And that would not be more of a SMPTE timecode. That's probably going to be LTC, longitudinal timecode, or something like that on an external type timecode box. I don't even know as of the time of this video if the BP-TRX would do something like that and be compatible with it, because I have not tested it. But that would be something for you to perhaps look into if you are considering doing timecode on the Rodecaster Pro. But that's the reason why, if you're using a lot of entry-level projects with your friends or something like that, doing a YouTube channel, whatever, and you're doing maybe a comedy skit, or you're doing something like what Dry Bar Comedy does and have a comedian up on the stage, then something like this would be a great setup. You could go wireless even with that. And because you don't have the expendable expense of the batteries, then that's an option as well. But regarding the Rodecaster Pro, hopefully this has given you some insight as to how to set it up. Remember, there are links down in the description if you would like to purchase the Rodecaster Pro, or to at least look at it. And I'm also going to put links to the NTG5 along with my video review and the Deity Connect products that you see right here. I've also done reviews of all of those except the BP-TRX as of the time of this video. But thank you for watching this episode of Sound Speeds, and be sure to tune in the future for more interesting deep dives on products, some things that you might not have ever considered before, like, for example, something like this for recording your movie, and of course, sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered, or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.